Sit down. I'll call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. We have the agenda before us. Are there any corrections, deletions, or additions to the agenda? Lisa, are you here to talk under public speaks?
At the end, yeah.
Well, we can move it up. Now, it's up to you.
I'm fine. You
You
guys
sure?
do your thing. Yeah, you stick to your agenda.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, the agenda will stand as printed. And the first thing that we have is the sheriff's report. Captain Carver?
Good evening, and before you the March monthly report. Calls for service for March were 917, slight decrease from last year. Crashes were up with 60, 7 injury crashes, 73 alarms, 184 traffic stops, significant increase over last year, 139 citations, 512 vacation and security checks, and 48 arrests. For the detective's report, there were 15 cases assigned, and there were 5 thefts, 4 aggravated robberies, and 1 recovered stolen vehicle case that were closed. And all 4 of those aggravated robberies were actually the same suspect. 4 for 1, and it was all the same location. And we have the comparison charts there for year-to-year comparisons. Questions?
Any questions? Good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Before we proceed, not a question for you, let the record reflect on the agenda. There's actually a spelling correction for new business. You should say Tanya Rogers. I know it says because we tend to deal with it on that topic. So.
I did that, Tanya. Because
We
every time I
promise it
talk,
wasn't
I
one of
saw
the
it. I was
things.
like, I don't think that's why I'm here, but
Yeah, there's some kind of
terrible. I
association.
can't apologize enough.
It's
I'm sure she
fine.
enjoyed the volume.
I know that you're all kind of in like PTSD mode.
Okay, speaking of,
All
we'll go
right.
to new business, and I'll turn that over to Lisa.
Thank you. I'm going to introduce Tanya Rogers here this evening.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
All right. So Greg asked me to do this kind of last minute because something came up for him. So my understanding is I'm just here to kind of go over the settlement agreement that we reached. Correct? Okay. All right. So as you all probably know, the township was the defendant in a federal lawsuit that was filed by Astra Retail, which owns a new store called Room 801, where Sexy comes to play. Now, what we know is that when the permit was applied for, it was represented that it would be a retail store, and then when Tom went to inspect it, it did not tend to be a traditional retail store. So the permit was not issued, or the certificate was not issued, and so a federal lawsuit was filed, including a temporary restraining order. And the challenges had to do with the way the zoning code handles adult entertainment. And as you know, a lot of these were adopted. I think that the current zoning code was adopted back in 2006, and at that time there was a lot of activity in federal courts. It has since settled out. There's actually not much new case law since about 2008. But essentially, any kind of adult-oriented materials are considered a form of expression, and so any type of restriction has to be limited to time, place, manner. And it would have to survive what's called strict scrutiny, which is to regulate any type of constitutionally protected right. There has to be a compelling state interest, and the government has to show that they have done it in the least restrictive means available. And the complaint alleged, let's see here, the complaint alleged a variety of claims against the way that the zoning code currently handles adult-oriented materials. So the code defines adult-oriented materials, I believe in Article 4, and then any store or business that wants to operate for adult entertainment has to get a conditional use permit. And so they would have to then go before the Board of Zoning Appeals. There's a series of criteria that they have to go through. And they can only have the business under the current code in an I-2 section. So there's only 2 or maybe 3 sections in all of Plain Township that are categorized as I-2. In addition to that, there's also restrictions. I believe it has to be about 1,000 feet from playgrounds, schools, churches, things like that. And so the way that the law was challenged was it was argued that it was a prior restraint on speech, and that had to do with the conditional use permit scheme. They also argued that the current zoning code vests arbitrary and unfettered discretion with zoning officials. That again has to do with the conditional use permit scheme. They alleged that the laws do not assure the issuance or denial of a permit within a reasonable time or prompt judicial review. And again, that has to do with the lack of the zoning code containing a hard deadline for the BZA to issue a decision. And then they also argued that they're overbroad and overly vague based on the definition of adult material. And then they argue also that the laws were unconstitutional on their face. That means that they're saying that regardless of how they're applied, the way the law is written, the law being the zoning code, is unconstitutional. They're also arguing that it's unconstitutional as applied. And that has to do with the manner through which the zoning code is written, where the adult entertainment can only be in an I-2. And there's only 3 small locations, and then there's all these other restrictions on it. So that's the argument against it. When we got into it, because it was a temporary restraining order, there was a very tight briefing schedule, and then we were going to have a full evidentiary hearing in front of Judge Adams. Judge Adams is a federal judge up in the Northern District of Cleveland. He's great, but he's very tough. And with constitutional stuff, he will rip you apart if you don't know exactly what you're talking about. So as we really got into this to prepare, we had some concerns that some of their claims might succeed in whole or in part. And that would have broad effects, not only on the adult entertainment provisions, but could impact some of the other uses that require conditional use permits. And that's where our concern came in. We don't want an adverse decision against the zoning code, which could have broader effects than intended. The other concern we had is that in a federal claim under 1983, if you want to file a claim against a government entity, as you probably all know, you can't just file it under the First Amendment or the Fourth Amendment. You have to file it under, it's called a statute called 42 U.S.C. 1983. That is a statute that allowed people to bring personal claims against government entities for violating the Constitution. When someone brings one of those claims, if they prevail, they are entitled to collect attorney's fees. And so that was another concern we had. Generally in the American system, everyone pays their own fees, but for constitutional violations, if they are successful, they can have, the court can order that the losing party pay all of the attorney's fees. Now here, this company hired a First Amendment specialist from Cleveland. I do not think that his bill, just for preparing for the temporary restraining order, would have been cheap at all. And so we had some concerns that this could adversely impact the validity of our entire zoning code, and also open the township up to damages. And so that's when Greg approached you and had some discussions, and we reached a settlement wherein there'd be no monetary exchange, which I think is good and fair. And the permit, the certificate would be issued only for a B2 use for clothing and apparel, vitamins and supplements, sexual devices, wellness and personal care, and sexually oriented expressive materials, the latter of which will comprise less than 10% of the retail selling area. And so where a lot of this confusion comes in is most of the case law that we looked at has to generally do with adult entertainment areas, you know, strip clubs, adult movie stores, those type of places. This one was a little more unclear because it's retail, and one of our law clerks doing research just said, you know, you can find most of the stuff at the mall, and she's right. You know, the lingerie that's being sold is comparable to Victoria's Secret. A lot of the other personal items you can find at Target, other places like that. And so that's where it gets a little more murky. And so because we had some concerns about attacking the zoning code and opening it up to damages, it was our recommendation that we entered into a settlement agreement, that we issue this permit, that it be very narrow so that they cannot expand the use, and also so nobody else can come in and try to do the same thing in a B2 district, and that the township then amended zoning code to have it more narrowly tailored for these types of expressive conduct certificates that may be required.
Which the amending the zoning code language needs to be done in an expeditious, thorough manner.
Yeah, we would want to do that quickly, because this is all public record, what's happening right now. Then I don't anticipate this is a huge problem. This is the first time it's come before the township since the statute was, or since the ordinance was enacted in 2006. But we don't want to open the floodgates, so we do want to move quickly on this, and amend it to be compliant with the controlling federal case law. So,
Question,
yes.
how do we, what's your best suggestion on monitoring this 10% issue? I know that it's tricky,
It's gonna be tricky. I think that you'd probably just want to go in periodically, monitor complaints. It doesn't seem like it's gonna actually be an issue, because it seems like this is really more of like a lingerie type
Yeah.
store. Anything that would fall within the more expressive materials. In the photos I saw, they weren't right up front, they were kind of back in the corner.
Right.
So yes, it's not gonna be an easy feat, but probably just how you generally would, temporary stop, or, spontaneous stop-ins, or responding to complaints,
Okay.
so.
So we'll have you start.
Sure.
Any other questions? Yes.
Appreciate the work you guys have done. I think most of us have probably either through individual conversations or already on this sucks. Quite
Yeah.
frankly, there's no nice way to put this. I know there's a number of residents who are beyond upset, but to your point, and I knew I commented, like, listen, the lingerie, the lotions, the whole 9 yards, listen, they can open, there's not a thing, anybody, if you don't like it, don't go there.
Don't go.
Don't support it. That's
Right.
You're right. But what I did have an issue with is the applicant, who happens to be an attorney, he lied as far as I'm concerned. Now, you guys can correct me on legalese, and I'm saying in my opinion, he lied because he wasn't totally forthcoming with all of the details first. Yeah, there was some clothing, there was some lotions. To start out from conversations, multiple conversations, and knowing even your follow-up efforts, no, we would never do anything like that.
Yeah.
And then boom, here it is. So it's deceit, it's misleading, it's not being forthcoming. At the end of the day, for anybody in the public, that's lying. That's
Yeah.
just what it is. Unfortunately, this board is bound by the judge's decisions and guidance. I've actually had the opportunity to sit in on a couple of Judge Adams stuff through leadership and some other stuff, and you're right.
He's direct.
You
You don't mess around with
you
Judge
don't
Adams.
want you don't want to snicker. You don't want to
Right.
look wrong.
No.
He is spot on. I think just for the record, too, based upon your timing that you had talked about, because I joined the board in 2010. We actually made the revisions to the zoning after 2010, and it had to do because of the issues down by 44th in
Right.
Cleveland
Okay.
Avenue, where at the back of another adult-oriented store that's much more, I'm gonna say, aggressive in nature and what they have in there, all of a sudden had another establishment at the back of it that we were getting,
Okay.
the sheriff was getting calls for because there were, essentially it was a meet-up swingers club where supposedly they met there and then they left. Well, then we were getting complaints about, hey, there's people standing on the trailers or on the roof, peeping, trying to see what's going on, and it just created a whole.
Yeah.
So, knowing this was not a this was creating undesirable circumstances at that, we said, we certainly don't want this going on anywhere
Right.
else in the township, and it was with good intention, and at the time.
Yes.
Right, yes, we said, okay, we can't ban them, we can't control where you go, so thus the industrial
Right.
was the most advantageous when we looked at it, so, it is what it is, but.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation. You actually jogged my memory, because about 20 years ago, both us and the county got sued in federal court over constitutional issues regarding a building inspection. And as soon as you said that about attorney's fees, I remember the judge telling us that then,
Yeah,
which is why he kind of talked us into settling this.
yeah, if there's, I mean, there's a lot of times where we have a case and we're pretty convinced that we're gonna prevail, and those we go forward, but if there's a question, you really need to weigh the risk. And so that's what we did here, and that's what we made the advisement on.
It's certainly not fiscally responsible to expend
Yeah.
township resources on projected revenue, because realistically, how would they even come in a number? Because location hasn't been open, so you can't tell me, oh, we lost X. Well, you can't take Toledo store sales and say that's why I get in North Canton or vice versa. So, I mean, they could have been something, well, around, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, the attorney's fees alone would have
Yeah.
been a number you're not used to seeing, I promise.
Yeah, that honestly probably would have been the bigger damage, to be
Yeah.
honest, if we would have gone further.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, does anyone have any
Anything
more
else?
questions for me?
No, thank you for coming
Yeah,
in
thank
tonight.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much.
Yeah, thank you.
Good job for filling in for Greg.
Yeah, no problem, thank you.
Thank you.
And that's the end of new business.
Okay, that takes us to the fiscal officer's report. Mr. Wolf?
Thank you. Fiscal Officer number 1 is a resolution to authorize the payment of pending warrants in the amount of $128,416.96.
So moved.
Second's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 2 is a resolution to authorize payment of regular payroll in an amount not to exceed $250,000.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 3 is a resolution to authorize payment for the following medical claims.
So moved.
Second's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 4 is the investment report.
It is actually nice to see the rates up a little bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
It's
yeah.
making a big difference, definitely.
Percentages. Yeah. Okay, anything special, see Tom? Next up.
Fiscal Officer number 5 is a resolution to authorize a refund as follows for overpayments of EMS as requested by Ohio Billing.
So moved.
Seconds.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 6 is a resolution to accept OTARMA insurance renewal rates for Plain Township's property casualty and vehicle insurance package with a $10 million liability limit for the period of May 5, 2023 through May 4, 2024, in the amount of $150,350 with the following options available.
So moved.
Second.
Which option?
No, let's get into discussion,
Okay,
because I want to talk about the amounts.
okay. So it's been moved and seconded. Discussion.
Do we need to reevaluate that dollar amount, just know in the amphitheater
We
back,
will.
back here?
That's a
'cause
good question.
that's-
Let me explain that.
I mean, even
Right.
at this point, it's not finished.
Right now, it's covered as it's being built.
Yeah.
When it's
Yeah,
totally
correct.
finished, I'll present it to them, and then this will change based on the finished product.
So they add a
And the
rider
total.
for only a portion of the year.
Yep. And right now, though, the entire building of it is already, I've already got
Yeah,
covered. But they'll evaluate it at that point and then make the suggestion of what the changes should be based on. Because we may have some change orders, so they want the in totality.
So at this point then, for sake of discussion, it's going with $10 million as stated in the resolution. It's not for any increased amount based upon the guidance administrator has noted.
So we're good with that original amount then?
We've increased the last couple years, and we are gonna see an increase after the amphitheater, so I'd hate to say, yeah, for the extra 900 increase when you're gonna be increasing again, so, and that'll be, June that'll come about.
Yeah, because that's, what, a few months ahead. So, yeah, that makes sense. Anything else? Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
That concludes the fiscal officer report.
Thanks, Tom. That takes us to the administrator.
Thank you. Item number 1 is a resolution to authorize payment to CDW Government for printers for the sheriff cruisers.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion?
This covers every cruiser.
It covers all our cruisers.
Do we need a service maintenance agreement on? minutes or?
Okay, anything else? Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Thanks, Lisa. That takes us to Fire Department Chief Schallenberger.
Thank you. Item number one is our monthly report. We enclosed the one picture of the fireplace there, that was kind of a storm-related fire because people were out of power and they were using their fireplace as a heating device, that wasn't kind of up to
Yeah.
100%, and they actually had caused the fire.
That's the right upper picture, just below the medic unit.
Well, yeah, below the med truck, yeah. Yep, that's it actually burned all the way to the floor, went all the way to the ceiling, and that confined space there.
I would say, you know, as far as it relates to the whole storm activity, kudos to everybody who was out between road, fire, parks, and anybody up at the sheriff's office, because certainly that last storm, it hit quick and hard, even more so than that first one. So, I mean, highly responsive. I know as I was driving through North Canton, even a couple days later, they literally just had roads barricaded off, like no trees. Trees are just across the road still, and I'm like, I'm looking at their power lines that would reasonably cause them. There were a couple situations where I'm like, how do you not have your crews out removing? So, thank you to everybody who worked, you know, get our roadways clear, residents safely taken care of.
Speaking of that, I think you could see the spike in calls on your little,
Yeah.
EKG.
Yeah,
graph
between
here.
the road, and actually the road
Yeah.
department did take some calls for us because they actually got calls before us, but,
That's the
I
first
think we
thing
had
I
like
noticed.
62 calls
Yeah.
to one day.
Yeah, I know, I have to work, just kept burning my phone out, so, good job, guys. Next, Chuck.
Okay, item number two is a resolution by Plain Township Board of Trustees to authorize purchase and payment of one thermal imaging camera from MES Supply for attached quote.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes. Number three.
Number three is a resolution by Plain Township Board of Trustees to authorize purchase and payment of Linklater authentication for Motorola Solutions not to exceed $8,500.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, discussion, this is just period, I can't remember.
It's-
This, we don't do this every.
No,
That's
this
what I
is
thought.
a update
Yeah.
through the
Software.
800 megahertz stuff.
Yeah.
All the radios had to be
Yeah,
brought up to the.
and
new-
reflashing.
Yeah, it's kind of like reflash, they call it link layering,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, anything else? Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Item number four is a resolution by Plain Township Board of Trustees to authorize payment for combination fire, smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors from Ace Hardware not to exceed $53,000 with reimbursement of 5% from FEMA once the items are purchased.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, discussion, good job on that, Chuck, for both the grant and buying locally.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we worked with the hardware store, they were able to give us our price within our grant
Yep.
budget, so, we'll be doing that twice.
Nice.
This year and the next year will be about the same amount of money, so.
Good. Yep, anything else? Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Item number five is a resolution by Plain Township Board of Trustees for purchase and payment to B&C Communication for radio tuning, batteries and software updates not to exceed $9,500.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
And that concludes fire department.
Thanks, Chuck, that takes us to road, JP.
Thank you. First item on roads agenda is our monthly report. Just like to give
Again, yep, just pass it along, just like we did to Chuck, pass it along to the guys that, Drew and I were talking about that just the other day, how lucky we are to have people that just have good, positive attitudes.
Yeah, and you know, just a big shout out to the crew too. We've been doing all, I know I talked to you, Scott, about that. concrete curb and gutter and getting all the laterals ready. These guys just been killing it here this last month, so 586 work orders, so.
Makes a huge difference when folks are properly trained and empowered. So what type of output you get.
Yeah, so kudos to the team. So.
Next.
All right, road item number 2 is a resolution to authorize purchase and payment to the Morph Corporation for the yearly user license on Builder Form Engineer Report System, not to exceed $2880 from the following funds.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Thank you. Road item number 3 is a resolution to declare National Work Zone Safety Awareness Week. Whereas National Work Zone Awareness Week is an annual spring campaign held at the start of the construction season to encourage safe driving throughout streets, roads, and highway work zones. And whereas National Work Zone Awareness Week is a way to raise public awareness for work zones and those who work in them, and that the motorists are encouraged to slow, to posted speed limits, eliminate distractions while driving, and be watchful for roadway workers, their equipment, and vehicles on the side of the road and work zones. And the theme for this year is you play a role in work zone safety, work with us. Just a quick thing here, 2020 there were 857 work zone fatalities, up from 762 in 2019. So with that being said, just again, a resolution that the Board of Trustees adopts the work zone, or declares the National Work Zone Awareness Week throughout all of Plain Township's jurisdiction from April 17th through April 21st, 2020.
So moved.
Second's been moved and seconded. Discussion? You know, I never even thought about this too. That you distracted driving law.
Exactly.
Hopefully, will play something in reducing those as well. And I'll bet those statistics don't include fire and police at accident scenes. Those statistics probably are just for road workers.
Yeah.
So you put that together with, you know, police and fire and
A lot of it.
accident zones. And it's,
If you could give me the statistics and some information, I can do Facebook posts, all that.
yeah,
Absolutely.
that'll be good.
Absolutely.
Anything else? Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
So, and finally, road number 4 is a resolution to authorize purchase and payment to Myers Tire Supply for a Coates CHD 6330 tire changer, not to exceed $18,773.25 to be divided between 2 separate funds from the road and fire departments.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? That's just for, obviously, bigger tires and,
Safety.
They're truly handling right now.
Yeah.
yep, perfect. Anything else? Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
And that completes road.
Good job, JP.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to zoning, Mr. Farrar.
Thank you, sir. First item on the agenda is a monthly report.
Tom, quick question. Is the bottom picture, is that old garage they had been on down by Market and 55th?
This is on Prospect,
Okay.
and actually, the fire department brought it to our attention, they got called.
Gotcha.
The health department has declared it uninhabitable.
Are you serious? They actually, I'm impressed. Sorry for the sarcasm, but
Yeah.
after we had the houses on the south side of 62 that were literally caved in, buckled out to the ground, and then one that looked like a stage prop with only 2 sides up, and said, well, they could be rehabilitative.
There
This
it was.
has got a better chance of being rehabilitative just on the first, so, good.
All right. Anything else? Next.
The second item on the agenda is a resolution to declare item A as a nuisance abatement.
So moved.
Second's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
That's all for
Thanks,
zoning.
Tom. Takes us to parks, Mr. Steinberg.
Thanks. The only thing we have is the monthly report.
Questions, Superado? Nothing from law director, nothing from communications. That brings brings us to the portion of Public Speaks. And I believe Lisa Paramore from the Stark County Board of Developmentally Disabled is here to speak to us. So if you would just give your name and address to our
Certainly.
fiscal officer.
Yes, Lisa Paramore, address 8641 Scenic Ridge Avenue Northwest, Clinton, Ohio, 44216.
Thank you.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be in front of you and so many familiar faces, I have to say that. As I said, my name is Lisa Paramore, and I am the Communications Manager for the Stark County Board of Developmental Disabilities. And I'm also the parent of a young adult son with developmental disabilities. The Stark County Board of DD serves children and adults, about 4,100 to count right now, all across our county. Our mission is to support choices and create opportunities for people with disabilities and their families. Our vision is that people like my son, his friends, your neighbors, can be fully included in our community. However, there are still attitudinal barriers that keep this from happening, whether it's how you look, how you walk, how you talk, or how you learn. But I have to say, and this is an aside from everything else I've spoken on different communities in the last 2 weeks, this group before me, you have done a lot to help us try to break down those barriers. And I personally need to thank you. 25 years of helping us host Great Pumpkin Race, creating it. We could not have done that without you, and we can't continue to do that without you. Your Paint the Plow project, your invitation to include artists with disabilities was phenomenal, and we loved it. Your park system, and working with Challenger Baseball and making that happen. You are a phenomenal group of people that are helping us on a daily basis break down those barriers. So I do need to go on and say that on May 2nd, Stark County Board of DD does have issue 21 on the ballot, and this is very important so that we can continue to do the work that we do on a daily basis. It is a strict renewal, and it will not cost taxpayers any more money. Each year, tell you some of the things that we do. We work with over 700 families of children birth to age 3, whether they have a disability or a delay. Each year we provide preschool and school age services to 170 students with complex needs, students that come from every 17 of the school districts down to our school in the Canton South area. Additionally though, we work with 500 students in all of the school districts, keeping them with their brothers and sisters and their neighbors. So we work very tightly with all the educational programming going on in the county. Each year we fund supports and services so that 1,800 adults can live, work, worship, and play in the communities along with you and I. And you need to understand that once we provide that funding is for the rest of their life. That is the commitment that Stark DD does. So as my son, he's 22 now, as he turned into an adult, Stark DD committed, and they look at his needs every year, reassess, and support him in his life. So there may be some people, my son that's 22, there may be somebody that's 40, 50, 70 years old that we are still supporting and making their life happen. So just to review, I want you to know that there are thousands of families in our community that trust us and rely on us to help them. And we provide these vital services and supports to a growing number of people. In the last 10 years, we have seen an increase of 30%, or almost 800 people with disabilities that need our services. And we have continued to do it with the same amount of money. So our pledge is that with the renewal, we're going to continue to see that growing number of people, and we're going to continue to do it with the same amount of money, being a good fiscal servant to the community, and do the very best we can for people with disabilities. So it is my hope that we have your support on issue 21, that the community supports us, and that people will get out, exercise their right to vote on May 2nd, and support issue 21. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
again from the bottom of my heart for your support. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. See, no concerns with the trustees. Approval of minutes for March 28th. I will move for the approval of the minutes for March 28th.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes. We do have a need for executive session. Be it hereby resolved by the Clay Township Board of Trustees, Stark County, Ohio, to adjourn to executive session at 6:35 p.m. from this regular meeting of April 11, 2023, is authorized under the Ohio Revised Code 121.22G for the purpose of the consideration of 1C, the dismissal of a public employee or official. 1D, the discipline of a public employee or official. 1F, the compensation of a public employee or official. 1G, the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual. Number 2, the purchase of property for public purposes, the sale of property at competitive bidding, or the sale or other disposition of unneeded, obsolete, or unfit for use property in accordance with section 505.10 of the Ohio Revised Code, where premature disclosure of information would give an unfair competitive or bargaining advantage to a person whose personal, private interest is adverse to the general public interest. And number 3, a conference with the law director or other retained counsel concerning disputes involving the township that are the subject of pending or imminent court action.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mrs. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.